When we signed up for Lions 49ers Monday Night Football back in September, we were probably more excited about it than we are now. But this game is going to rock. There's playoff implications for the Detroit Lions, as well as seeding implications for the Detroit Lions. Here is everything you need to know about this game. If you're new and you've never seen one of these before, welcome. My name is Max. I make these every single week for Thursday Night Football, Monday Night Football, the biggest games on Sunday. And now that we're in December, we got Christmas games, Saturday games, a Friday game, all of those games broken down on this channel. So make sure you subscribe and join the family if you have not already. If you've been here before, you like this type of content, make sure you leave a like on this video as well. Lets me know you enjoy this type of stuff, and it helps the videos perform so I can continue to do this for you guys and give you the best information possible for your fantasy teams, for your higher or lower projections, to give you an edge over your friends or your group chats. Without further ado, we will talk about this game. We're going to talk 49ers offense versus Lions defense first, then go Lions offense, 49ers defense, but I want to make sure you guys know where to get all my picks for these games. If you click the links in the description, you can get all this stuff. All my picks, player entries, everything is going to be on Instagram. If you're not following me on Instagram, you're missing out. All that stuff is on there. I don't know when you're seeing this, but Saturday we hit a big parlay in the Bengals-Broncos game. You got to make sure you're following on Instagram. That's where all that stuff is. If you're looking for live picks, which we have actually been pretty good with as well, that is all on my X or Twitter, whatever you call it. Links for those are in the description. Now, if you want bonus cash to make your picks with your higher or lower entries specifically, Sleeper, Underdog, and Better Picks are all going to give you deposit bonuses or deposit matches to help you get some free entries and free picks. So Sleeper is going to give you a free half-yard pick as well as 11 free additional entries if you join with code LEADS. That's the key here. You only get it if you join with code LEADS, L-E-A-D-S, but free half-yard pick, 11 free entries. Underdog is going to give you a deposit bonus up to $1,000 and a free half-yard pick. Better Pick's going to match your first deposit up to $200 and give you another free half completion pick. Now, if you want to see how I'm doing, follow all my picks. I know a few of you guys have commented that below. Pickett is the place to do that. If you're not tracking your picks on Pickett, you're missing out as well, but there's a link for that in the description. Without further ado, let's break this game down. Now, we're going to talk 49ers offense, Lions defense first. And looking at the Lions defense, there are a couple data outliers. This team has struggled mightily against the pass, especially recently. You look at the quarterback attempts and yards, 7th most attempts given up and 7th most yards given up to opposing quarterbacks. When you look at Brock Purdy and what he's been able to do in his recent games, it's been a pass fest. He's been throwing the football a ton. I'm going to pull up his projection for you right now. He has been throwing the football a lot, and he's honestly been doing it pretty well. You look at the last couple games, outside of that crazy weather game, right? He had a 300-yard performance against Miami, a 300-yard performance against the Bears, another bad weather game in Buffalo where he barely threw the football, and then tougher game against Seattle, but 300 yards against Tampa. So as many 300-yard games as not in the past 6 games. And 2 of those 3 games where he did not have 300 yards, it was pouring rain, terrible weather, and snow against Buffalo. There's not going to be that much rain. There's not going to be that much bad weather in San Francisco. We'll pull up the weather report very quickly for you here. I don't worry too much about the weather in this game. Now, I am a little bit worried about, you can see right here, 54, partially cloudy, precipitation, 0%. These breakdowns go very in-depth. We got to look at the weather too because it matters, right? You look at pass attempts, Brock Purdy, 40-plus last week against Miami. That was a good run defense. Detroit's run defense is very good. Now, they've been worse against the run recently, and that's very important to note. When you lose a guy like Aleem McNeil for the year, your middle is a lot less clogged up. But 49ers are really banged up in the running back room, so I don't think they're going to have a ton of success anyways. 32nd most attempts, so the fewest attempts, and the fewest yards given up to opposing running backs. I don't think the Niners are going to have a ton of success on the ground, and I just don't think they're going to run the ball that much in general. We can look at some rushing numbers here offensively for the San Francisco 49ers, and there's nothing here that really sticks out. Again, obviously, when you lose Christian McCaffrey and even a guy like Jordan Mason, who's been producing at a really high level, it's going to be difficult for you to continue to produce and continue to have a ground game that complements your pass game. The 49ers definitely don't have that right now, though, and that's very important to note. You can look, we'll pull this up really quickly for you guys, in terms of overall rush attempts per game, or rush attempts overall, 411 through 15 games. That is the 19th most in the NFL, and even though they're efficient on the ground, they are not wildly productive. Now, in terms of overall rush yards per game, you can see this. They're doing pretty well. They're just outside the top 10, but they're not running the ball a ton. Now, that leans into explosive runs. Is Isaac Guerrero a wildly explosive runner? I don't know. He's playing a defense that hasn't given up a ton of explosive, that's 15-plus yard runs really all year long. Really all year long. And in the pass game, has only given up the 30th most, so third fewest receptions to opposing running backs, and 20th most yards to opposing running backs through the air. Where they really struggle, though, is wide receivers. And we got to look at target rate and the type of coverage they play. You can look at some of the game logs against the Detroit Lions in the past, and wide receivers have had their ways against these guys, whether it's an inline or whether it's an outside guy or a slot guy. The reality is receivers have been producing against the Detroit Lions in the past. Let me scroll down here. Like you can look at this. Keenan Allen for 141 against the Lions. Bills don't throw to wide receivers a ton, but Keon Coleman still had 64 yards. Christian Watson had a big game, had a huge catch too. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen again with big games. Michael Pittman had a big game. Brian Thomas Jr. had a big game. Look at John Mechie, and this was without Nico Collins, of course. Jaden Reed, Calvin Ridley. Look at Jefferson Naylor and Addison all. CeeDee Lamb, DK had 100. Marvin Harrison Jr. had 64. Again, not really the number one option there. Godwin had a big game, and you can track back all the way to week 1. These guys have struggled against wide receivers really all year long. They've given up big games to receivers all year long. If you've ever watched the Detroit Lions breakdown on my channel, you're going to know the first thing I'm going to say about them. They play a ton of man coverage, the most man coverage in the entire NFL. I look at the 49ers wide receivers against man coverage, and there's some decent leans here. In terms of overall target rate, Deebo Samuel and Jawan Jennings are almost identical in terms of how often they're being targeted against man coverage. Here's the thing, though. When you compare their man coverage target rates to their zone coverage target rates, Jennings is getting an increase by 2%, just under 2%, excuse me. So 2% more targets against man compared to zone. Again, the Lions don't play a ton of zone. They play the most man. Deebo is getting a 4% increase in terms of his targets against man compared to zone. Deebo Samuel's coming off of a 96-yard performance, last game. I don't know if you can truthfully trust Deebo Samuel. I don't know. It's hard to, right? It's very hard to trust Deebo. But the reality is he's very explosive. And one thing the Lions have really struggled with is the explosive pass catchers. You saw Christian Watson have a big catch. I just went through a huge list. Chunk plays galore. Deebo Samuel's only projected 48 yards. And again, everything will be on Instagram and X, all in the description. Make sure you're following over there. But Deebo is only projected 48 yards against really the best coverage matchup he's had all year long. What's interesting, too, in terms of target rates, the Lions don't really allow any targets to inline or running backs. Running backs, they're dead last. But inline, they're 5th fewest. Now, the Niners love to throw the football to the inline position. George Kittle is very good. But even though Kittle is the 3rd highest target rate against man on the 49ers, it decreases by 7% against man. He's getting targeted way more against zone than he is against man. Here's the most interesting thing, though. Ricky Pearsall, who, again, had 37 yards last game, had 16 2 weeks ago, really hasn't been getting a lot of targets. He's been playing. His target rate increases 13% against man coverage. If you're looking for a plus value play, because right now he's projected 19 yards, which is not a lot. And the reality is it could happen on one play. If you're looking for like a plus value play in a game where the Niners are probably going to have to pass the ball a ton, I don't mind that at all. I really don't, because he's getting targeted way more against zone or against man coverage, compared to zone. It's almost the inverse of what Tim Patrick does. If you guys, we'll talk about Tim Patrick here in a minute, but if you guys have watched any Lions breakdown like we talked about, whenever they play zone coverage, the number one thing are 2 things. David Montgomery's out now, but the number one thing I've talked about outside of David Montgomery receiving is the fact that Tim Patrick has a dramatic increase in terms of his receiving yards against zone-heavy teams. It's been really good to us. This is the same thing just on the man-to-man side. I think you can lean into Ricky Pearsall a little bit and say, okay, he has a better matchup than he would if he was playing a zone-heavy team. And this is the most man-heavy team in the NFL, remember. 13% increase in terms of targets. All it could take is one play. I don't think it's a horrible look, especially against a team that is going to force you to throw the ball, and they are not going to let you run the ball. I think that's the way you lean. If you want to look at something straight, guys, like a plus value straight, I think you can ladder some of these guys up. Truthfully, Jawan Jennings even projected 64 yards seems a little bit low. I think if you water down those, put them together, again, all that will be on Instagram for me. But I'm looking at the wide receivers before I look at George Kittle because, again, Detroit is very good against tight ends. 31st most receptions, so second fewest receptions and fewest yards given up. They're very good against tight ends, very good against tight ends. And if I'm Detroit, to be honest with you, that's who I'm trying to stop in the pass game regardless. That is where we're looking when it comes to the San Francisco offense against the Detroit defense. In terms of kickers, really on both sides, there's nothing here. They're both bottom 10 in field goals allowed, so I'm not really leaning into that at all. But that is what I'm looking at there. Let's move to the Detroit offense against San Francisco, because this defense has been very good since everybody's come back. Hufanga, Greenlaw, Nick Bosa. This defense is very good. Now, they're not, I guess the biggest edge in terms of data outliers is the ground game, right? They're giving up the 8th most attempts, 16th most yards, and through the air, they're also below average in what they're giving up. So you look at Jahmyr Gibbs' scrimmage yards, I don't think anybody has adjusted to what he can do and how he can produce, especially his projections. I almost just want to take it blind because of how much zone the Niners play. The Niners play the 11th most zone, right? He's projected 125 scrimmage yards, which is a lot, but in his one game as a starter, in a tougher matchup against Chicago, 150 plus. So I think you can lean into that. He's going to be a focal point in this game, but we got to talk about the zone rates. We'll go through data outliers here, like 31st most, so second fewest yards given up to quarterbacks, fewest yards and receptions given up to receivers, second fewest yards given up to tight ends. Like, there's no data outliers there that make me think, okay, yeah, we got to hop on Sam Laporta or we got to hop on Jameson. There's nothing there. Nothing there. There are a couple things in terms of target rate and coverage rate, though, we got to talk about. I want everybody to look at the past games with the San Francisco 49ers defense and see if you notice anything here, especially in the pass game from the past two games. See if you notice anything here. Who are the number one producing guys in these games? And again, it doesn't have to be crazy games, right? But Puka Nacua is the number one producing guy here. Tyreek Hill, I guess, number one producing guy here, but had the most targets for sure. DJ Moore, the number one producing guy here. In this game right here, again, Bills don't really use their wide receivers too much, so I'm not going to lean into that. That was also a very bad weather game. Number one producing guy here was Romeo Doubs. Number one producing guy here. This is the outlier, JSN. I don't want people to think about that, especially because DK played, but DK had a very good game. Number one producing guy here, CeeDee Lamb. Scrolling back up again, the most targeted receiver, the first time, Seattle played San Fran, it was DK. The number one guy here, Michael Wilson. If you guys aren't seeing what I'm saying, a lot of the top producing guys like Justin Jefferson, even Alan Lazard, they're the out wide guys. The Niners are being targeted on the outside at the 10th highest rate, and the Lions are throwing to the outside at the 10th highest rate. Obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown is the main slot guy. When you look at out wide guys, Jameson Williams is a guy who's been very good against the types of zones the 49ers play. But I talked about it like 3 minutes ago. Tim Patrick sees a 5% increase in his targets against zone compared to man. I go look at Tim Patrick's game log. I go look at his projections, and I feel pretty confident about what I'm seeing. 29 receiving yards. It's a little too low, right? You had a zone-heavy, balanced team, I guess, but more zone-heavy team in Chicago. Didn't really do anything last week. I understand your worry there. But 4 games prior, you had Chicago, again, more zone-heavy. Green Bay, one of the most zone-heavy teams in the NFL. Buffalo, one of the most zone-heavy teams in the NFL. And Indy, the most zone-heavy team in the NFL. He had 55, 48, 43, and 30. And I'll pull this up right now for you guys. Tim Patrick's usage against zone is really something to note. Really, really something to note. And I think 28, 29 yards for this guy is way too low. And I don't really give out straight picks just like on the YouTube like that. But if there's any pick I'm riding straight, it is this one. I love this. 29 yards for Tim Patrick again. And you can scroll through his game logs. Jacksonville, he didn't hit that number. It's a more man-heavy team. But you can look again. Dallas, pretty balanced. Seattle, pretty balanced. Minnesota, more zone-heavy team. He had 25. Green Bay, 2 for 12 worries me a little bit. But you look at the increased usage, and now with David Montgomery out, they're going to throw the football a little bit more. 55, 48, 43, 30, all against some of the most zone-heavy teams in the NFL, guys. Tim Patrick, to me, has a significant edge in terms of his targets against zone compared to man. And if you don't want to lean into the third-string wide receiver, I get it. But Tim Patrick is the guy in terms of target increase against zone. Here's the really interesting thing, though. The biggest target increase against zone came for David Montgomery. And obviously, David Montgomery's not playing. I wouldn't think too much about that, except for the fact that the Niners are being targeted out of the backfield, 10th highest rate. The Lions are throwing the backfield at the fourth highest rate. And that increase in terms of percentage in zone man targets for Montgomery was 17%. Like, that's a lot. That's a pretty big increase. So you look at Jahmyr Gibbs. That, and obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs, we talked about it, scrimmage yards, just watering it down, putting it with something I like it. He's going to be involved. 29 receiving yards. Even with Montgomery, he's at that in 3 of the last 4. But I want to pull up these game logs for Gibbs because we know how good he can be. What do you say? 29 receiving yards. Just scrolling back through. Yes, no, yes, that's 4 yeses, 5 yeses, no, 6 pushed here, or so 1 low, sorry. 5, 6. So 6 of, what is that? 14 overall with Montgomery, yes. 1 game without Montgomery, yes. In terms of half and half, looking at target rates, just matchup free, Gibbs has hit it half the time. When you look at the 49ers now, who again are giving up 13th most catches to opposing running backs out of the backfield, 16th most receiving yards, this has to be the focal point. It has to be the focal point of the pass game. I think we could see a couple of screens. I think when you look at receptions, it's kind of juicy too because he's only projected 4 catches. Now, 4 catches has hit, again, last 3. We'll pull up the game logs again. 4 catches for Gibbs. We got yes, not there. Wait. Yep, there we go. Yes. So a very similar rate. So 6 of 15 or 7 of 15 if you include the non-Montgomery game. I really like Jahmyr Gibbs in terms of his receiving production this game. Now, we have to look at the zone increase for the other guys, though, because, again, we talked about Jameson Williams, 1% increase. Even though it's a small increase, it's an increase against zone. 1% increase, he's projected 53 yards. You look at some of the zone-heavy teams he has played. Chicago last week, 143. Obviously, he had the big catch, but he still had 5 catches. Buffalo, a little more zone-heavy. Interesting to know, only 37, but Green Bay, 80. Chicago, 28. Indy, 64. Jacksonville, more man-heavy. Houston, balanced, but 53. And then we got the Rams, very zone-heavy beginning of the year, 121. Tampa, very zone-heavy beginning of the year, 79. Arizona, balanced. Seattle, balanced. Dallas, balanced. So his bigger games have come against those zone-heavy teams. I hate leaning into Jameson Williams receiving yards because it seems like it's such a volatile thing. But against a defense that I think is going to stop the run, they've stopped the run recently, the Lions are going to have to pass. And, as much as I like Amon-Ra St. Brown, he has the same target increase as JMO too. Not really getting targeted in the slot a ton. This has been a little bit of a down year for Amon-Ra St. Brown. And obviously, he doesn't run all of his routes from the slot. But I think there's more value in Tim Patrick, Jameson Williams, and Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, Sam Laporta has a 5% decrease against zone, which is weird. Like, you wouldn't expect the tight end to get used less against zone, but I'm staying away from that. I think if you want to sprinkle a touchdown, though, guys, I think Tim Patrick is so worth it. I think it's so worth it. And I think, honestly, guys, on the other side, I'm going to get on Ricky Pearsall in one way or another, whether it's yards or sprinkling a touchdown. There's going to be a lot of points in this game. So I think you can get on a touchdown, a higher value touchdown, really on each side. I think right now, if I had to tell you two, it would be Pearsall and Tim Patrick. But that's what I'm looking at for this game, both sides. If you guys enjoyed this, actually, before I finish, Detroit, 3.5-point favorites in this game. Truthfully, if I had to pick a side, I would be on Detroit with a chance to clinch the number 1 seed. But I'm not doing it. I think Detroit wins the game. I think it's going to be close. I think 3 points is a perfect number. I'm not touching it. If you want any other picks, though, remember, everything in the description. But that is what I got for this game. If you guys enjoyed this Monday Night Football breakdown, this is our final Monday night breakdown of the year. Make sure you leave a like. And if you made it to the end, make sure you comment which player you like the most in this game. God bless you guys. We will see you next week for the Week 18 breakdowns. We got a couple videos coming out special for you. But thank you guys for watching.